everyone. We're going to try a video in transit since I have to be up early. Dropped children off at school a little early today for basketball practice. So I've been doing a bit of a dive into a couple of concepts that I've come across on. One of those is Tang, which is from China, which essentially translates to lying flat. Similar to what came about during the pandemic in the United States, quiet quitting. So the concepts are generally the same. However, the concept isn't new. It just gained prominence in the West under that quiet quitting moniker. So essentially, it's been going on in China a bit before that, around, from what I read on Wikipedia and other sources, around 2020. And essentially, it came about where you have really the working, primarily Gen Z, the Zoomers, some younger Millennials, but generally the Zoomers of the society, seeing what their parents and senior generations went through, particularly Millennials, with China's hard policy when it comes to work life, specifically what is referred to as 996. And that essentially is the typical work week of the company person, which is 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. And it's not just that, but that is pretty much the idea, the spirit of why this generation is now lying flat. And essentially, similar to quiet quitting, they're basically doing just what they need to do to have a living. They're dialing back on their consumption. They're dialing back on the lengths which they'll go to rise, if you will, to be upwardly mobile. And they're essentially focusing more on hobbies, focusing enough on the things that are important to them. However, they're not just being bums or anything like that, or staying locked up in their houses. So that differs from what you might be familiar with in Japan, the hikikomori, or grass eater, I think it translates to loosely, whereas they're really isolated, socially isolated. I think that's the key difference between the hikikomori in Japan and those practicing Tang in China. Anyway, the reason I thought about it is that having Zoomers as children, Gen Zs, a lot of the traits I'd seen in their group, particularly because a lot of them are teenagers, some of those things come a little bit more natural, particularly if these teenagers or even younger adults are from either middle class or more affluent families, whereas they don't necessarily have to work. They may work, it may be good for them to work, their parents may even want them to work and get some sense of building independence and responsibility, but they don't have to from an economic standpoint, meaning their parents aren't relying on their children going out to work in order to sustain the household. So I noticed for a few years, I'm sure some of you with children may notice as well, is that when some of my children would be watching TV in the living room, we have one of those L-shaped couches, and because of its positioning, some of them would literally lay flat in the prone position, meaning they're resting on their elbows, they're on their stomach, feet out across the couch, watching TV. And then it hit me just a few weeks ago, lying flat. And so they're not doing absolutely nothing. They're just placing themselves in a way that is most conducive to them doing what they need to do without that much extra strain on or effort to achieve the same end. And I believe that these young people, and I've had a turnaround about this, they're not crazy for lying flat. They're not crazy. Just as I've been a bit turned around in that I don't believe these young people are crazy for quiet quitting either. Like the spirit of it, the idea, which is more, I think, well articulated with the Chinese youth, at least that I've seen, in that if we are getting a pittance in terms of salary or wages that we can barely stay in place with the extra effort, yet alone move ahead, why should we? When we can dial that back, maybe do some minimalism in conjunction with that, curtail their desires, and still have a more healthy, enjoyable life. Why not do it? And that is something I've seen even in my life. I mean, I'm 50 plus Gen X rather, and I've seen that. I have noticed it in the last 3 years since the pandemic and how the dynamics and demographics of corporations have changed. Is that the same way effort was rewarded in corporate America when I started my career is very different from what it looks like now. There's no more, you put in 20 years, or 25 years, or 30 years, you're respected. No, all that's gone. All that's gone. It's been gone for a while, but it's really gone for this pandemic. And so I had to ask myself, why am I going to be 130%? And to the point where, because I've been working so long, certain aspects of work life actually affected my health. Why am I going that 130%? Whereas, not that I need the money, would the extra money be nice? Of course, but I don't need it to survive. I don't need it. The extra bit of cheese that I would get, so to speak, is not worth the diminishing returns in terms of health and stress. And furthermore, it's not really appreciated as it has been in the past. And if anything, in some cases, there's even some resentment because those in a position of management or leadership that may not be as proficient or experienced may begin to think, oh, this person is showing me up, as opposed to the real thing, which, hey, I have a little bit more experience. I see something that might be helpful or harmful. I point it out for the benefit of the team. It's not seen like that. And so, with that whole ecosystem changing, there's a part of me that says, you know what? In a sense, I'm lying flat too. Now, this isn't, again, I want to be very clear. I'm not saying don't contribute to your community, don't contribute to society, don't do things that are beneficent to yourself and to others at all. What I'm saying is that it is logical to me if your efforts above what is required is not only appreciated or moving you forward, it's barely keeping you in place. And so one must ask oneself, where is the incentive in that? It's not logical.